Hello and welcome to the stream. I'm Ahmed Shahabuddin. Today, domestic violence in Iraq. The so-called honor killing of 22-year-old YouTube vlogger Tiba al-Ali, who was strangled by her own father, has renewed calls for Iraq to adopt laws recognizing gender-based violence. We'll talk more about her case in today's show and ask, what's stopping Iraq from criminalizing domestic violence? Just a warning to our audience that today's conversation will involve descriptions of violence against women. Joining us from Baghdad, Marcin Al-Shammari, a non-resident fellow with the Brookings Institution. Also in Baghdad, Hana Adwar, co-founder of the Iraqi Al-Amal Association and the Iraqi Women's Network. And in London, Ruwaida Mustafa, she is a British Kurdish political activist based in the UK. Welcome to you all. Marcin, I want to start by asking you personally if there was anything that surprised you when you first heard about Daiba's story. How did you feel?
Sadly unsurprised by it, because the context of Iraq and the punitive nature of tribal society is something that continues to inflict violence on women throughout Iraq's contemporary history. So, of course, I was saddened, shocked, angered, but not surprised. And I think that really is the root of the problem, that we continue to expect this kind of violence against women in Iraq.
And Hana, when you hear that answer, I'm curious, given your decades of work on this issue inside Iraq, was there anything that stood out to you about her situation, particularly the fact that she had previously, as you know, been escaped?
Feeling very sad that she is very young, 22 years old only, and feeling always that she is innocent and she could really live in a peaceful way. And she has to choose her partner as every human being that has the title for that, entitled for that.
And Ruwaida, I just want to ask you, I mean, what stood out to you about this case? I can't imagine you were surprised, but was there something particular that shocked you about the way it was handled or not?
I think the most troubling aspect of this particular case is that the police failures and the fact following her death, there hasn't been any arrests or any change in the way women who report domestic violence. There's no change in direction. There's no change in terms of politicians coming forward and saying, actually, we need to do much more. And in particular, male politicians, because this isn't a fight that women alone can succeed in. It's something that needs both men and women to jointly work together to change the way, to change the fact that Iraq continues to descend in terms of the way it treats its women. And I just wanted to point out something. So Iraqi Kurdistan region has passed legislation to criminalize domestic violence, both in terms of sexual, physical, and psychological violence against women. And Iraqi Kurdistan region is very much part of the country, and it has made some strides in terms of attempting to reduce violence against women and putting in place regulation to ensure, that there's some sort of legislation for women to say, actually, this is, my right was violated here, and this piece of legislation protects me. But even so, even in Kurdistan region, we still see very high number of women killed.
Right, and I think that indicates that perhaps it's a cultural issue as much as it's a political issue. Marcin, I saw you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
Yes, so I was going to add on Ruwaida's point about not having male allies and not having male politicians or policymakers invested in working on this, and the kind of the lack of response on both the legal front and the parliamentary front. And I wanted to add that what's even more astonishing than this is the fact that there's very few female allies politically for Iraqi women, and that despite the apparent quantitative success that Iraqi women have in parliament with a 25% quota, being surpassed actually in the last election, there's only a handful of women in parliament, and even a handful is a generous term, that actually advocate for women's rights. And what truly saddens me is that I'm almost certain that this death is going to be forgotten when it comes to legislation in a few months, and nothing will come of it. And more Iraqi women will be killed, and nothing will come of it, because the kind of legislative force we need to see this through is still missing in Iraq right now.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Hana. I want to ask you after. Go ahead. Did you want to say something, Hana?
Yes, I would like to mention that really a big list of names of victims, like what happened to Tiba. There are so many of these, like Malak al-Zubaydi, like Ayel Musawi, like Marwa Abu Sayba, like Hawra and Zahra, the two sisters, like Nawzan al-Shimmari. As all these, they have been killed, and their perpetrators either been exempt for the excuse mitigations punishment, or they have been already impunity for them. And this is our problem, that to think about these lives is being really got, without any punishment. It is horrible for us. And always we say that Iraqi women, there is no safety for Iraqi women. And this is due to the marginalization, to the, marginalization of the rule of law in the country. This is the main issue for us now.
And I appreciate your passion, and I appreciate you both bringing up politics as well as the legislative lack of mobilization, if you will. We have also an Iraqi advocate for women's rights, Anfa Al-Abid, who said this after the protests on February 5th. Take a listen.
We don't only have the case of Tiba. There are many, hundreds, dozens like Tiba, who are killed in the name of honor and shame-washing. There are many cases that are not publicized and are disclosed as cases of suicide, when they are in fact killings in the name of honor, without any investigation, without any proof. We are not only here for Tiba today, but for the hundreds, dozens of women who are killed just like Tiba. It is about the law and not about Tiba personally.
As you said, echoing the fact that this is too many names, too many people, too many lives lost and affected, I want to ask you on the back of that, Hana, if I were an Iraqi woman, if you will, what are my options? What are my tangible options in terms of protecting myself?
This is the way that we are trying to raise the issue for the society. And it needs that we have to mobilize, many different people, different strata, beginning from the rule of law, enforcement of law apparatus, especially, and to the family itself. Because even the young people, they have raised this issue. Who is the next? And if the family doesn't understand that to save their girls or their daughters or their wives, it means there is no way for women to live in a peaceful way or to build her future. It is a very essential things, that the understanding from the family and to mobilize society against these crimes. And this is very important to get it. And I think that we got some of that much better now.
Sure.
Especially when we think about domestic violence crimes.
And I saw Marcin.
This is now becoming an issue.
Marcin, I saw that you wanted to jump in there.
I just wanted to add to what Hana was saying about society in Iraq in general, and building off what Ruwaida said about the issues happening in the Kurdistan region as well.
Yeah.
I think there is a big problem with tribal society in Iraq. I know where Tiba's family is from, and these are areas I've visited, and they have norms that are strongly punitive towards women. And the issue here is that these actors are allowed to act with impunity, not only when it comes to women's issues, but also in general. Sometimes they're even seen as partners, tribes and tribal leaders, when it comes to policy issues, and not only by the Iraqi government itself, but even by international organizations. So on one hand, sometimes you have institutions, both domestic political institutions and international ones, that legitimize the existence of these patriarchal norms so long as they're operating in one space. But then by legitimizing them, they're creating these very powerful actors that flaunt the law and that continue building on this culture and on this norm that makes women less valuable in society and very easy targets and very easy prey for any small violation. So I do think that everyone has a role to play in this.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And speaking of the fact of everyone having a role to play in this, so many people playing a role actively, I want to share with our audience, on February 5th, Iraqi women staged a protest in Baghdad. This was an anti-domestic violence law that they were calling for. and it's been stalled in Parliament for ages. We have two supporters who are sharing with us some of their views on this. Take a listen.
Tribal customs dominate the law. A person who kills his daughter or sister is jailed and released after 6 months.
Her father killed her intentionally and was encouraged by Iraqi law, which allows killing under the pretext of so-called honor motives, amid a complete cover-up by the clan.
We heard Rueda from Marcin about how tribal customs play into all of this and factor into the lack of protection. What would you add? Anything based on what those women had to say?
I think it's not just that it's a tribal thing, but for example, in Iraqi Kurdistan region, we see honor killings happening in the cities as well. For me, at least, I believe that women also play a role in upholding very sexist and patriarchal standards. We see that it's not just the men who are killing women, but also some women who also advocate for the sick mentality in society. So I think if the rest of Iraq can learn from the Iraqi Kurdistan region, some of the things that they've established includes a helpline, multiple shelter houses, legislation is passed to criminalize violence against women. You've got an entire directorate that specifically deals with cases of violence against women. But what women activists are trying to do now is to have the court, have a special court to oversee honor-based killings or domestic violence cases, so that women have the privacy they need and have the security they need to ensure that actually if they come forward in a court of law, they will have justice. That because you have things like bribes, you have things like witnesses being intimidated or women who are going to the court being intimidated, they're often scared to come forward. And so to add on all of that, I think the one thing that's always missed is that women play a role in how Iraq deals with its own women. It's not just men who have patriarchal attitudes. In the case of Tiba, her mother allegedly also, was involved in what happened to her. It wasn't just men doing it, but also a circle.
Well, it's interesting to me because the recent election, I mean, it was encouraging to see so many female MPs, especially from independent parties. So that would give the impression that perhaps, there is more hope, and yet we see so often things continue to get stalled. And I think you were pointing to some of those issues for our audience, so I appreciate that. Also, I want to share in full transparency, before we went live, you brought up the fact that, you wished perhaps more Iraqi men would be part of this conversation and asked why we didn't include a man's voice. I see you, Hannah, nodding. On that note, I want to share a comment that's in our YouTube chat. This came in just moments ago from Lynn Mothi Belli saying, "Not all men believe in honor killings for women. So I'm afraid that this could end up igniting a civil war among the men because this behavior angers other men." Just one opinion there. But Hannah, you wanted to add, as I was mentioning, the absence of a man from this discussion?
Yes, I would like to say that as we are a civil society organization, we could really circulate the questions of the domestic violence. And it is an issue now becoming not among civil society, but among, society as a whole. And this is the public cases has been, has broken the silence against it. So this is now becoming an issue. It's not just before that time, we were always silenced and people, they don't want to speak about it. Yeah. But now even not in the cities, I am speaking about in the rural areas where we could succeed, like in the very conservative areas like Hawija, where we have really made groups of male, speaking against domestic violence and, about the punishment, the importance of punishment and, supporting their wives and sisters to be, aware about their lives and to choose their, their rights and their lives. And to choose their partners. And this is now the change is coming, not only in the cities, but even in the rural areas. And this is due to the civil society movement, which is supported by enlightened people, enlightened men, they are also joining us.
So,
how you say it, attorneys, lawyers, and judges, and others, where we are really feel that the change is coming and is not far away, and especially among the new generation.
And I appreciate you bringing up the new generation. Obviously, the way this topic, previously taboo, still very much taboo, is being discussed in the virtual realm, in social spaces, is why we wanted to have this conversation on the stream. For our audience who might not be very familiar, though, with Taiba's case, I want to ask you, Marcin, if I can, looking at this tweet from Mina Al-Droubi saying, following the horrific death of Taiba Al-Ali, activists tell me that it's time for the government to change the penal code and end immunity to male perpetrators. Although numbers aren't known, cases up to tens of thousands like Taiba's remain hidden due to social taboos. Could you, Marcin, explain to our audience that doesn't know why she went to Turkey, kind of the ins and outs or the overview of Taiba's reality?
The story is quite horrific. She went to Turkey because she was escaping an abusive family, and her brother in particular was being sexually abusive towards her. So you can imagine it was harrowing circumstances for a very young woman to leave her country. And also she comes from a very small town and or a small province in Iraq. And so she spends time in Turkey. And when she decides to come back, it is, like Ruwaida said, at the encouragement of her mother, who says that they can make amends with the family, and perhaps her father can be made to understand her choices, and maybe this will help her finally marry her partner that you see in many of her YouTube videos. But rather than any of that actually happening, as Ruwaida said, her mother was complicit in bringing her to Iraq and making her feel safe, and only for her to be killed. And I think she's reached this level of attention from media outside of Iraq because
there's so many videos of her. Right.
Exactly. You feel very close to her when you see her. I mean, even if you didn't know who she was, like I didn't know who she was prior to her being killed. But then as soon as you see her videos, you feel like you see this person who it's astounding that their life was cut short.
And when you say you see her, sorry to cut you off, but when you say you see her, you really do see her, right? Beyond just the visual, you really feel like you can access her sort of spirit. And I think that's maybe why, not to pontificate, but Ruwaida, anything to add? I know that there are parts of her story that are really harrowing and the abuse that she faced.
I think the one thing I'd like to add is when you monitor Facebook in particular, these killings don't always attract sympathy. You have individuals who glorify the killing of women in the name of honor. You have people saying, well done, should have been done sooner. And I can only comment, obviously, because I monitor Kurdish media much more than Arab media. But on the Kurdish side, we have a platform called women.krd, where we document women killed in the name of honor. And 9 out of 10 instances, the women who are killed, you have really horrifying comments on Facebook in particular, where people rejoice and celebrate those killings. So to me, there's a cultural problem in addition to the fact that you have a government, lack of government initiative to curb violence against women. On the Kurdish side, even though you have legislation, it's just not enough. So the approach needed, in my opinion, is that you need a cultural change that's going to take time, because at the moment we have young girls who can see others on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. They can find like-minded individuals, and then you have those who hang on to conservative ideals. So there's going to be a clash of opinions, and it's going to get much worse before it gets better. To me, it's not a black and white issue. Even if Iraq were to pass a domestic violence law tomorrow, women being killed will continue to happen, but it's the first stepping stone to reduce it, hopefully.
And before we wrap up this conversation, I do want to share with our audience a report done last year by Al Jazeera's Simona Foltine. I want to share this because it kind of documents how domestic violence beyond Taiba's case has really been a problem, particularly during the pandemic and beyond. Take a listen.
There's one government-run shelter in Baghdad, but it only provides accommodation on a judge's order. Some women seeking urgent refuge turn to rights groups that run underground operations. This woman endured her husband's abuse for more than 20 years.
We have tribal rules. If the woman left her husband's house or her parents' house, she will be killed.
The tipping point was when he began to sexually harass their daughters. One night, they crept out of their home and came to this shelter.
The law doesn't protect me. Maybe they will find my location. I'm scared to sleep at night. I'm afraid of the tribes.
I want to bring some of the voices in our YouTube chat into this discussion. Ali Hussein saying, I appreciate that public awareness of this issue. It's nice to see that there's a debate about this in Iraq. And we have Sherry Toward saying, tribal systems have always been about women, education, and equality. Not all men feel this way, and some women haven't been educated enough. Thankfully, the world is waking up. So a question for you, Hana, does it feel like the world is waking up? You said that the young generation's inspiring you. Is there a reason to be hopeful here after 4 decades of you tirelessly trying to bring an end to this suffering?
You know, it is becoming an issue of the people. It's not only issues of women, but issues of people. And then when the young people speaking that we are condemning violence against women or girls, it is an issue. And when they speak about equality and they go to vote for women, this is what you have said from the beginning. The last elections has proved the trust of the society towards women to be in such position of the politics. So it means it's not only that parties, but even independent people. You know that 2 of these new parties, of women, they got the highest vote among women, over, about 30,000 votes. One of them in Suleymaniya and the second one in very small areas in Diwaniyah itself. So it means that there is the change among society and especially within the new generation. And when I remember also on the 13th February 2020, when thousands of women moved in several provinces with the, with the titles of condemning violence against women and girls. It was a big issue in Baghdad and in the southern areas during the uprising of 2019 and 2020, where women they've been, involved in this, and the partners, their colleagues, they have really, they guarded this demonstrations.
Yeah.
So this is not only in Baghdad, but I'm speaking about the areas of the very conservative, customs and norms there. So it is now the change is coming. And that's also, I would like to say that with the government, even when we have met with the Ministry of Interior yesterday, he emphasized that there should be protections for such, survivors from the domestic violence. And that's what we are doing. We are mobilizing ourselves as women with the society, as well as pushing the government, pushing the High Judicial Council to take steps against this, crimes.
And that's why we're grateful for you and everyone to join us and to continue to push this conversation forward. Speaking of which, we have a video comment that was sent to us from Shokan Ahmad. Take a listen at what this lawyer had to say from Baghdad.
بالنسبة للخطوات القادمة نحتاج إلى تعديل قوانين، خاصة فقرة 409 في قانون العقوبات العراقي بتجديد العقوبات بمن قام بقتل مرأة بسبب غسل العار كما عملنا في إقليم كردستان. ومن جهة أخرى يحتاج إلى وجود محكمة خاصة لتحقيق وإجراءات بما يتعلق بقتل النساء من أجل سرعة التنفيذ في جمع الأدلة وجمع الشهود في المحاكم، لأنه حاليا بسبب وجود دعاوي كثيرة يحتاج إلى أكثر من 2 حتى يوصل إلى حسم الدعاوي في المحاكم.
Madcine, we're running out of time here. I want to give you one last chance to give us your last thought. What should we be focused on moving forward?
I think, like Ruwaida said, there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the Kurdistan region. And you talked about Simona's report, which is an excellent report. But I think the important lesson that comes from this report is that Iraq is interconnected, and domestic violence legislation in one area won't be impactful without a countrywide legislation.
And it's also a reminder, forgive me, that's all the time we have, but a reminder that we're all connected. with you and with Iraq. So thank you for watching and for being part of this conversation. See you next time.